Okay. What? The soap comes to here. You need help? I'll help you out as well.
Sure. I need those tables that are down there and the chairs to come up.
I'm going
to be teaching you. Do I look like I don't eat? Baruch Hashem. I eat Baruch Hashem. Starting right. Let you know what to say. All right. Lag Baimer is a night. Thank you. It's a little crooked. It's okay. It's getting me. Perfect. Look at that. Look who's here. Okay. Lag Baimer is a night to learn Pnimius HaTorah. And we learn over here Pnimius HaTorah all the time. Tonight is extra special. To learn straight from the book of the Zohar, then we don't really understand much. When we learn with the Biyurim of Chassidus, then the Zohar comes alive. There's a sefer from the Alter Rebbe called Biurei Ha'zohar. Really, as people know it, it's a sefer from the Mittler Rebbe. But it's not really the Mittler Rebbe sefer. He's the one who produced the sefer. The sefer is really a sefer from the Alter Rebbe. It's the Alter Rebbe's mimer. That the Mittler Rebbe wrote down. The Alter Rebbe used to say Biyurim on Zohar. A lot of his memorim were Pashat Biyurim on Zohar. I chose this mimer, number one, because it's Parshas Behar. Number two, it's because it's the shortest mimer in Biurei Ha'zohar. It's not the shortest, but it's literally two sides. Usually the memorim go for a few pages. So it's good to learn a shorter mimer. It's on this week's parsha. And being that it's okay, like Boimer is okay to teach you not from what I know, but from what I don't know. So I didn't get a chance to learn this mimer really, really well. So I'm going to learn it together with you, not for you. Okay. The passage of the Zohar, the mimer. Let me start with the mimer itself, and then we're going to go into the Zohar, so you'll see where this is all coming from. This week in the Parshas Behar is the Parsha of Shemitah. And in Shemitah, and then after it talks about the laws of the Shemitah, which is the resting, letting the year rest, the land rest for a year. This year is a year of Shemitah. And then it also discusses the laws of a servant. It talks about sale of real estate, other forms of monetary interactions. And then it talks about what happens with a Jewish slave, if a person sells himself as a slave. And it talks about the idea that a person can sell himself as a slave, and if he goes out after 6 years. But should he choose to stay longer? It's possible for someone, a slave, to choose to stay longer. He says, I love my master, I love the house over here. And he doesn't want to leave. So then the mitzvah is that the master has to take a certain tool, and it has to make a hole in his ear. And you take that tool, and you put the tool by the door in his ear. Fine. So this mimer is going to discuss, based on the Zohar, what's the reason why the Eved, the servant, if he wants to stay longer, gets a punishment in his ear. So Rashi talks already why the ear. And Rashi says, because the Eibishter is insulted, literally. The Eibishter is insulted when this guy says, I want a master. Hashem is insulted. Hashem says, I am your master. You need a different master. I'm not good enough. So, and what does that have to do with the ear? Because Hashem said a long time ago, you stood at Har Sinai. And at Har Sinai, wow, you heard me say that the Jewish people are servants to me. God took us, Hashem took us as his servants. And when this person obviously didn't do good listening, didn't take it in, he heard, but he didn't absorb. So therefore his ear wasn't functioning the way he should, because he really should have heard when Hashem says, I am your master. Why is he looking to have another master? So you say, and originally he was very, very poor. He was in a situation, he was in a dire situation. But now you already did your time. You're ready to leave. I mean, the halacha is when a slave leaves, the master has to give him a lot of gifts. So he gives him enough to start off living life normally. If he at this point doesn't want to, start living as an independent person, which is, and thereby being subjugated to Hashem's authority, and Stens wants an authority of a human being upon him, Hashem says that's why the ear has to be punished. Fine. According to Pnimius HaTorah, which according to the inside, the esoteric view of all of this, there has to be, he asks a question like this. And we'll see in a minute. The question basically is as follows. Every punishment that you give a person, according to Torah, is not a punishment. It's really a healing. When a person does something wrong, they bring about some kind of a blemish in a certain part of their soul. So when they get the punishment is meant to be literally a procedure in that part of their soul that has been injured. Now, we know there are 10 sefirot above, 10 attributes above. The Tzelem Elokim Asas Adam, we are made in the image of Hashem, and our souls are in the image of the Eser Sefirot, of the 10 attributes above. So when we do a sin down here, we cause a blemish not only in our neshama, but in our neshama as it is applies in the sefirot, in the attributes above. When someone is rejecting Hashem's authority, what does it mean you're accepting upon yourself another king, another master? It means there is a disconnect on the level of servitude. You are meant to be a servant of the Eibishter, of Hashem, and you're going and you're making yourself be a servant of someone else. So in which element of the divine is the person disconnecting? Or where is the person making a blemish? Where is he insulting? Where is his insult reaching, so to speak? And which point is he blemishing? Hashem's kingship. Because Hashem is a king, right? Hashem is a king. And from the level of kingship, you're his subject. We know Ein Melech B'loi Am. There is no king without a people. And a people needs a king. So at which point is the blemish taking place over here? This person is rejecting Hashem's kingship. So the blemish is in the attribute of Malchus. Malchus is the final attribute. Now Malchus is the mouth. In the physiological structure of a person, Malchus is the mouth. Where are we drilling a hole? Not in his mouth. Where are we drilling the hole? In his ear. So the Zohar is really perturbed by the question. Why are you drilling his ear? Now what's ear? So we know in Hasidus, we know that vision, sight, the eyes, is associated with a very lofty level called Chachma. Chachma is the eyes. Like we know the Chachamim, the wise men, are called Einei Ha'eda, the eyes of the assembly. So Chachma is the eyes. The ears, to hear, is Bina. Bina is called Shmiya. It's called hearing. If we are boring a hole in his ear, means that we're doing some kind of a tikkun in the Bina of his neshama. The problem is this person didn't have a blemish in the Bina. This person's blemish is in Malchus, which is much lower. So why is the punishment in Bina? Because why does he need a tikkun in his shmiya, in his hearing, which is Bina, when his whole idea that he's rejecting God's kingship is in Malchus? So then the punishment doesn't match the crime, so to speak. It doesn't match the tikkun that needs to happen. So let's read the Lashon of the Zohar to begin with. Veratza Adonov as Oznaz. I'm starting, we'll skip 2 pages. We'll skip the page of the Zohar itself, because I'm going to come back to that in a moment. There's 2 pages where I have Lashon HaZohar. Those are the pages that I have Nekudos. Sefer HaZohar, Lashon HaZohar. That we're skipping for now. We're going on to this page called Biurei Ha'zohar. It's the second to the last page in the pamphlet. We're starting on the top where it says Veratza Adonov as Ozman. So he's bringing, this is a passage, this is a pasuk, and he's bringing a passage of the Zohar. The Zohar says as follows: Shmiya, listening, which is where we're boring a hole in his ear, in his power of hearing. Bahai asar talia. is dependent in that place. Hearing is dependent, meaning is connected to that place. Now, which place is that place? That place is Malchus. Malchus is called place. So Behar Asar Talia, which means hearing, Shmiya, where we bore his hole. The Zohar is trying to explain. Why are we boring a hole in his ear? Because he was pogame in Malchus, the Zohar says. And Shmiya, hearing, is Behar Asar Talia, is dependent on Malchus. Asiya, action, not the hearing, the action. Le'ela, that's higher up. This is a very cryptic statement, but let me try to explain it for a moment. The Zohar is saying something that makes no sense, at least before we learn the explanation. The Zohar is saying something that is total opposite from what we know. The Zohar is saying action, asiya, doing, that is registering very high, on a very high place. Shmiya, hearing, we're talking about action and listening and doing. That reminds us of the Yom Tov of Shavuos that's coming. Because when Shavuos is coming, we're going to say, what? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. So there's two elements, there's hearing and there's doing. So the Zohar says, hearing, listening, is dependent, meaning where does it register? Where does it connect to? Hayasar, that place. Which is the place? Malchus. Asiya, action, is le'ela, is higher up. Malchus is called latata. Malchus is the lowest of the 10 attributes. We know, for instance, give you an example. When we say shamayim va'aretz, heaven and earth, Malchus is called aretz, earth. Shamayim are the sphirot on top of Malchus, all the supernal attributes. Even the emotional attributes, even the 6 emotional attributes from Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, they're called Shamayim. Bina is Shemei Shamayim, the heaven of heavens. It's way up. So the Zohar is saying, an action is vibrating. When you do an action down here, it vibrates all the way up, La'ela, all the way up. But listening, Shmiya, is in Malchus. Therefore, since this person did it pagam in what? In Malchus. Why? Because he doesn't want to be a servant of God. He's choosing a servant, another servant. That's the reason why we bore his ear, because his ear is shaykh to Malchus. And the question that he's going to ask, this is the question that the Alter Rebbe is saying, but that's not the way we know it is. Because we know that hearing is bina and action is Malchus. Malchus is speech, Malchus is action. Malchus is the lowest element of the human being. It's it's speech and action. Dibor and mais. And here the Zohar goes and flips the whole thing over. The Zohar flips the whole thing over. So let me read it over here. Veratza, Adonov, Shmiya Behar Asar Talia. Shmiya, listening, is in the place which is Malchus. Asiya le'ela, Asiya is high. So that's what the Alter Rebbe is asking in a Yesh Lahav and mimer zeh. We need to understand, what does this mean? Da'aloi mevur, we know, shapagimu b'shmiya. It's saying over here in the mimer. The mimer is saying, the Zohar, when he says mimer, he means the Zohar, not the Hasidic mimer. In the statement of the Zohar, it says that the pagam is in shmiya, is in hearing, shehi b'malchus anikra shviyas, which is in the level of malchus, which is called the seventh of the sphirot, is malchus. Kidu, as it is known. And when you bore the ear, b'shmiya, it's in hearing. So the question is, when you're boring the ear, which is in shmiya, he bebina, that's bina, because remember we said before, vision is chachma, hearing is bina. Like we find, shu bigamatria oizen, the word bina, he wants to connect bina. There's going to be more understanding in a few minutes. We're just breaking. I want to break open the mimer first a little bit the map. What are we talking? What's the question? What is he talking about? And he's saying like this. He's saying bina is connected to shmiya, to listening. Where do we find that? He says, gematria a lot of times is very telling. when we know the gematria and we can break open the gematria. So he says Bina is gematria oizen. Now, if you try to do gematria, if you learn what's it called again with emunah, and you don't necessarily need to check out whatever he's saying and validate it, then you can continue further. But if you are a little bit of a heretic, like sometimes I am, and when he says something is a gematria, you're not sure if it's true. You know it's true, but you want to check it out yourself. So you do your math, and when you do your math, you realize that Bina is not gematria oizen. So it's not even close. Bina and oizen is not the same gematria. What does he say? Bina gematria oizen. So on the bottom he says, look in a different page. So that page you don't have, but I have the book. So later, in a few memorim later, he brings the same idea that Bina is gematria oizen, but there's a trick. You have to steal the yud out of Bina. So when you make Bina without a yud, Beis Nun Hey is 58. 57. Beis Nun Hey is 57. Oizen, Aleph Zayin Nun, Oizen without a Vav. That's okay, because he writes Oizen without a Vav, is 58. Now we're good already, because gematrias we all know are good when they're off with one, right? But hold it, he eliminated a yud, and afterwards it's still not gematria, but it's off with one. But with the koilo, right, you're good. So obviously, why are we letting the yud out? I don't know. I can't tell you that. I don't know why we obviously you can't decide gematria and just subtract letters. If the letter is a letter, but the Alter Rebbe could. I can't, right? None of us can. But he's not saying his own. He's bringing from the Arizal. Bina, and it is probably a deep reason why the yud of Bina is not there. But the main letters of Bina, which is Beis Nun Hey, is gematria oizen, which that tells you that Bina is associated with hearing. And actually it makes a lot of sense. We'll see soon. Bina is hearing. So if you're boring the ear means there's a pagam in Bina. But the problem is the pagam is not in Bina, the pagam is Malchus. So that's what he's asking. Veratza oizen b'shmiya hu b'bina shu b'gematria oizen iki yedua, as it is known. Sharia b'chachma, sight, vision is in chachma. Ushmiya b'bina, and hearing is in bina. The imkain, and if so, eich asiya. How is it that asiya, action is always the final product, action. Again, 10 spheres, chachma, bina, das, tefer, all the spheres, emotion. What's the malchus element? The malchus is the final action. Malchus is speech. For example, the Eibishter created the world. The Medrash says Hashem created the world with 10 aspects. The chachma, and the final one is the Sphiras HaMalchus, because through Sphiras HaMalchus is when the creation literally happens. We also know, for instance, I'll give you another interesting thing. We know it says that there are 4 worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. So each of these 4 worlds are animated by a different sphera. Even though there's all 10 spheros in each world, but each of these 4 worlds is animated by a different sphera. Chachma is the energy of Atzilus. The predominant energy in the world of Atzilus is Chachma. The predominant energy in the world of Bria is Bina. The predominant energy in the world of Yetzira are the 7 emotions. And the predominant energy in our physical world down here is Malchus. Malchus is Asiya. Malchus is action. Because Malchus is affecting the outside. What's Malchus? Malchus means you are a king over someone else. All the other experiences are internal. Chachma, Bina is your understanding. Emotions are your feelings, how you feel. You feel about someone, but it's still your feeling. Malchus is the actual domination or the actual influence on someone. You're commanding someone. You're ruling over someone. Ein melech b'loya. That's why it's speech, because speech is interaction with the outside, and for sure action, because the whole idea of doing an action means you're doing a pa'ula and something outside of you. Okay, you're throwing a ball, you're painting a painting, you're plumbing, you're putting together piping, whatever it is that you're doing an action. It's outside. Malchus is outside of it. So Asiya is Malchus. And Sharia the Im Kain, he's asking the question. How is it? Asiya shehu malchus, Asiya which is malchus. Le'ela is high up. Ushmiya shebebina, and Shmiya that's in Bina and Bina, Bahayasar shehu b'malchus. What is the Zohar saying? That listening, that the reason we bore his ear, because it's Bahayasar, which is in malchus. Va'aloi nahapachu, it's the opposite. That's the Alter Rebbe's question. In other words, he doesn't get, how can we say that the reason why we bore the ear of the Eved is because there is a pegam in Malchus, but Malchus is not associated with Shmiya. Malchus is associated with Asiya, with action. It would make more sense to either bore his mouth, because that's Dibor, or his hands. That's where you have Asiya, action. Not something associated with the Shmiya. So now, if you actually go back to the Zohar, because it's Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's night, if we go into the Zohar over here, hold on. Yeah. Okay, it's a very interesting Zohar. Zohar is, I'm going to go from over here just to read to you. It's going to give us a little background into this idea where the Zohar is pinpointing where the Eved, where this servant is causing some kind of a blemish. Right? And that his blemish is in Malchus. The Zohar, for instance, is going to explain why they bore his ear by the door. Because Malchus is called the doorway. Za'ashar Lashem. Because what's the Malchus? Again, in every world there's 10 spheres. Malchus is always the entrance way, the transition where you go from one world to the next world. Malchus is called the door. David HaMelech is Malchus, and he says Daloisi. Daloisi is from the word deles, from the word door. Malchus is the Pesach. You go, it's the entrance way. There's the entire structure, and Malchus is the doorway, the way in. Since Malchus is the door, that's why we bore his ear for the Eved at the door, because he's paigim Malchus. But why in the ear? So let's read the Zohar for a minute. This is on the first page of the Zohar that I made, 2 pages before the beginning of the mimer. It's just give us a little bit more geschmacka background than what we're going to be learning. It's on the second column of the page. On the you see, I should have numbered them. I did this in a rush. I didn't number them. But you see on the top of the page, it says Yud Beis. It's where you have the Lashon HaZohar, 2 pages before the mimer that we were learning. It says over here, Zacharnu es hadaga ashanoichu b'Mitzrayim chinam. He brings the pasuk that the Jewish people said, remember the fish that we ate in Egypt. We ate a fish in Egypt, chinam, for free. So it says over here, B'loi bracha, which means without a blessing. D'loi hava alana b'Mitzrayim oil de le'ela. What they said chinam means, when the Jewish people said, remember we ate the fish for free, what is it free? It means that they were not when they were in Egypt, they were in exile, they were servants to Paro, and because of their servitude to Paro, they could not be servants to Hashem. That's why we find that what is Hashem saying to Paro the whole time when he's taking the Yidden out of Mitzrayim? He says, they're my servants. How can you be messing with you want to take them for your service, they're mine. In other words, you put your yoke up. You can't have the yoke. You can't be subjugated to 2 entities. Who's your master? Choose your master. You can have one master. Who's your boss? If you have 2 bosses, you don't have any boss, because there's an exclusive surrender, and you can't have more than one. So in Mitzrayim, they were without any mass, without the Eibishter. Why? Tochazi, and he brings an interesting idea. The Zohar says, "Come and see." Avdin peturin me'oil malchusa de. Slaves are pater from mitzvahs. They're pater from the yoke of heaven. Valda peturim in mitzvahs. That's why they're pater from mitzvahs, because they are, in other words, when we say Kriya Shema every day, we say first accept the yoke of God, the yoke of heaven, and then you can accept the yoke of mitzvahs. But if servants, they don't have a yoke to Hashem because they have the yoke of their master. So they're not subjugated directly to Hashem. That's why they're pater from mitzvahs. My ol malchus shamayim, what does it mean, the yoke of heaven? Elakahai Torah, like very interesting idea. This is a famous statement that he brings in Tanya. He brings this line, where the Alter Rebbe in Tanya teaches that a person needs to have ol malchus shamayim. That means serving Hashem with love, even with intense love, is insufficient. Not only insufficient, it's actually lacking the fundamentals of fundamentals. It's lacking the very basis of being a Jew. Your first and primary platform or bedrock of your Jewish experience is accepting Hashem as your master. Meaning it's not what I enjoy. If I enjoy Yiddishkeit, wonderful. If I enjoy mitzvahs, terrific. If I love doing it, fine. And if I don't like it, I do it anyways. Why do I do it? Because Hashem said so. So the first and primary thing is to have oil malchus shamayim. And he quotes this Zohar from Pashas Behar. It's interesting that in Tanya, he usually doesn't say where he'll bring a Zohar, he won't necessarily say which parsha is it. But actually in Perek Mem Aleph, it's a very famous Perek in Tanya. It's the one Perek that it's recommended by Chassidim to know this Perek by heart. Because over there, it's like Reishis Avodah ve'ikra v'shor. He talks about the Hizboninus over there, that the big, awesome, infinite king is standing on top of you and watching over you, and he's taking interest if you're listening to him or not. He's meyachid malchusai upon you. Very powerful perek in time. Knowing that the Eibishter, Hashem himself, is a melech, and his kingship is dependent on you, and he is directing his kingship upon you. And over there, he says. He brings the Zohar. And what does the Zohar say? Kahai Torah, like an ox. You have to put a yoke on an ox first. If you're going to bring an ox into a field, you're not going to get any benefits from that ox unless you place the yoke on the ox. Once you put the yoke on the ox, then the ox can be a productive animal. Or else it's a good for nothing. I mean, it's a damaging creature. When you put the yoke upon it, then you can begin tavla alma. In order to bring out good for the world, the ox needs to have a yoke. The Eloi kabbalah hahu oil, and if a person or an ox does not, let's say an ox doesn't allow itself to put the yoke on it. It's a stubborn ox. Every time you want to put the yoke, it fights. It wiggles its way. Loi avid mida, then this ox take for garnished. Meaning in the field, you're not going to get any productive. See, the ox used to be the tractor. Today they have the tractor. It used to be the ox. So the ox, you're not going to get anything good if you don't put the yoke on it first. Hochenami, so the Zohar says, a person needs to take upon himself the yoke of the Eibishter first. And afterwards, I think the Yiflach Le B'choma, the Itzrich means that he listens to it. I'm not sure. The Eloi Kabbalah Le or Hai Bekad Mesa, and if the person is not Mekabel, doesn't accept first the yoke, Lo Yechel LeMiflach, he can't serve anything else. There has to be, that's according to Chassidus, that's what the morning Shachris is. It's a Chassidus. According to the Gemara, the Mishnah, not even the Gemara. The Gemara says that in the morning, the first thing, you read Shema, you first surrender yourself, you accept upon yourself the yoke of heaven, first the yoke of Hashem, then the yoke of mitzvahs, and then you can go by and have a day, a productive, godly day. Okay? That's why it says in the pasuk, Ivdu es Hashem, serve Hashem, be'yiro with fear. My be'yiro, k'maydatom areishas chachma yiras Hashem, v'dom malchus shamayim. This is the acceptance of malchus shamayim. Begin kach oil malchus shamayim. Valdo hai bekad mesa, and that's the idea of oil malchus shamayim. Yiras, that's malchus shamayim, the heavenly kingdom. Oil malchus shamayim, the yoke of the heavenly kingdom. Valdo hai bekad mesa hu dekoila. That's why this has to be the first in the ingredients of being a Jew. Man oichach, what's the proof? Well, he says, tefillah shel yad bekad mesa. First, you put the tefillin shel yad, begin the Bahai Ayah L'Shar Kedusha. You see, that's interesting. He's referring that the tefillin of your hand tefillin you put on before your head tefillin. I guess I would, again, this is my own assumption. I didn't see any pirush on the Zohar. And in the mimer, he's not explaining the rest of the Zohar. See, some mimerim, he goes through and explains the whole passage of the Zohar. In this mimer, he's only focusing on one line. I don't have the explanation on the rest of it. But I think, this is my own assumption, is that the head tefillin represents more the element of understanding. Learning, understanding, chachma, bina, understanding. That's the tefillin of the head, the moichin. The tefillin of the hand is asiya, action, which has to do with accepting the yoke. Accepting the yoke means I'm going to do. Na'aseh v'nishma, I'm going to do. Whatever you tell me to do, I don't have to understand. So that's what you see over here. He says you put the tefillin shel yad first. Before you put on the head tefillin, you put on the yad. Because by a Jew, the deed always has to go before the action. I saw an incredible story today. Not much today in the morning. I saw a story from Reb Shlomo Zviller. Reb Shlomo Zviller was a big Chassidish Rebbe, very big tzaddik who lived in Yerushalayim. He was a miracle worker. He was a tzaddik. He was a very, very special person. And one time, he was running around the shul, like frantically. And he had 100. He had I don't know, it was 100 shekel. He had a bill, and he was asking people if anybody has change to change up the bill. And you could see he was very, very into it. And they were like wondering, like, what's with him? Like, what? So they asked him, like, what? So he said that he saw there's a yid who walked in, and the guy needed change. But from the energy that he had and running around, I mean, think about it. You're in a Yerushalayim shtibel. There's like 15 people coming in every 10 minutes needing stuff. This guy needs, this guy needs a this, and that one needs a that. This one needs your phone, your telephone, so you can make a phone call. And this, it is in Eretz Yisrael. Yerushalayim. Everybody, all the people, everybody, half the people are collecting. The other, everybody needs something. And this is an everyday occurrence. And he's suddenly running around looking to change this guy's big bill. So they asked him, like, what? So he said, I don't know, I had a feeling at that moment that when I saw a yid needed help, and I had a sense that by me, there was an imbalance. The sages say that anybody whose chachma, his wisdom, is more than his actions, then is nothing worth. Then his chachma will not, his wisdom will. In other words, if your knowledge exceeds your actions, if your doing of good doesn't match your amount of knowledge, then it's not going to last. In Pirkei Avos it says, you have to do more than you know. As much as you know, you have to always exceed in mitzvahs, in action of doing, because a Jew can't be based on understanding. A Jew has to be based on bittul, on a surrender to the Eibush. And it's amazing, he was so sensitive that he sensed at that moment that he's in an imbalanced state. So he had to jump up and do action, run around the shul to help this yid out. So there should be, right now, mitzvah, deed of action to overpower and go above his state of divine consciousness and understanding that he had. So we're learning over here, if he doesn't have this, the holiness does not dwell on him if you don't have a foundation. This is such a powerful statement, that a Jew can be doing everything in Judaism. You can learn Torah, you can do mitzvahs, you can be mahadr b'mitzvahs, you can do everything, but there's no holiness there. Why? Because the foundation is not based on na'aseh v'nishma. It's not based on if Hashem says, I'm listening. Every single thing that God says, this person says, I agree with. It makes perfect sense. He's such a brilliant person. Immediately the Eibishter says something, he has 20 gematrias and 30 reasons why this is such a good idea. It needs to be like this, and it has to be like that. It always makes sense. He's always agreeing. So there is never a moment where Hashem says, do, and he does because God says. The problem with that, there's no basis, there's no surrender. And the basis of Judaism, holiness can only come in where there is space. And what's the space? The space is this state of bittul. A yid has bittul to the Eibishter. That bittul, that nullification, creates the space. And in that space, Hashem dwells in that space, and that's the holiness. So the Zohar is saying, if there's such a powerful state, if there's no oil malchus shamayim, yoke of heaven, as the primary basis of your mitzvahs, of your Jewish experience, then what? then there's no holiness in it. Because it's about you, it's not about Hashem. It has to be about Hashem. He said so. That's why we also say that Aaron should come bizois. Now Aaron is the Kohen Gadol. We can imagine that Aaron HaKohen is the epitome of Avas Hashem. Love Hashem. His soul is burning up with fire. His two sons passed away from their ecstasy and bliss and love to Hashem. So Aaron is like the unbelievable. Yet, what does the pasuk say? Bizois Yavei Aaron. In mystical, the Or Chaim HaKadosh talks about it. In mysticism, it is always connected that Zois is Malchus. Yira Shemayim. Simple fear of Hashem. So Aaron will go in El HaKodesh, which means our entry into holiness has to always be based on the foundation is fear of Hashem. But here's an amazing thing the Zohar says. You can't have another boss. You can only have one boss. You can only have the Eibishter. You can't be in servitude to anybody else. So for you to have an oil malchus shemayim, it cannot dwell b'mandi iukafus ba'achara. Someone who's subjugated to someone other than Hashem, then you can't be in a state of bittul Hashem. Valda, and that's the reason, avdin peturin ma'ol malchus shemayim. An eved, a person who's a servant of another human being, is exempt from oil malchus. It's impossible. You can't be subjugated to God if you have another master. V'ima I oil petirin, and if they are putter from the oil, from the yoke, mikol shar peturin, then you're putter from every mitzvah. The shar lo sharya le the barnash adish takich gabe b'hai oil. Nothing, no other level of holiness can dwell upon a person if it doesn't have the foundation of the yoke of heaven. I can't see the last few words. It's a little cut off over here, but we're going on to the next page. We turn over the next page. And that's the reason why it says that the Yidden said, you ate b'mitzrayim china. What does china mean? And oif hachi over here too. Yetze lachav shichinam. The slave goes out for freedom. Chinam, without payment. Do avdahava. Because he is a servant. The Zohar has a different pirush in the word chinam. According to the Zohar, the meaning of the word chinam means because the person was free from any kind of yoke of heaven. Okay. Now, we're talking about what type of slave are we talking about here? In the parsha, by us. Now let's go back to our parsha. We're talking about a slave who was already set free because the 6 years arrived and he served 6 years. The 7th year, he's supposed to go free. By the way, it makes now a lot of sense why he goes out in the 7th year. Why? The 7th is Malchus. If you want to, when it comes to 7th year, the 7th is always Malchus. So you get to the 7th year, but he's got to sync himself with Malchus. Malchus does not allow for you to have any other servant. You can be a servant, because else you can't sync with Malchus. So Malchus demands that he goes out. Because why is he, it's the first time I'm ever having that insight, right? It's coming to me as the second. Why is the guy sent out 7? Because when it comes to 7th year, the Eibishter's Malchus, since it's 7 is Malchus, the Eibishter's Malchus is now kicking in. And when God's Malchus kicks in, it kicks away all other Malchus. Every other master, out. Just like Hashem and Mitzrayim. I'm the boss. What do you think? Out. So that now we get the 7th Malchus. But what happens if this Eved is stubborn? And what does he say? I love my master. I like it. In other words, it doesn't bother me that I'm not under the God's servitude. I'm okay with serving Yankel, Moshe, Chaim, Baruch, whatever. I'm okay with having a master, a human master. That's what it says. Once the servant is free, and he's already in a state of menucha. Oil. So then the yoke of heaven is ready to descend upon him. My Asar from the level of Malchus, the Apik Leilacheri that took him out to Cheres. Which place took him out to Cheres? The Eibishter's Malchus took him out to Cheres. So from that place which brought him out to Cherus, they're put now. Hashem is throwing like you throw on an animal, you lasso an animal. Hashem is the level of Malchus that kicked out the other master and pulled the Eved out to Cherus, is now extending his lasso to lasso him in for what? To the servitude of Hashem. But if the person doesn't want to go out to freedom, which is the I love my master, so the Zohar says, now this person is for sure being a pagam in Malchus, because he's rejecting, Hashem is throwing him an invitation to be his servant and not anybody else's. Hashem let him get away 6 years being a servant to someone else. Now the 6 years is over, Malchus is dominating, and Malchus is calling this guy back to servitude. And he doesn't want to enlist. He's poiging in that place. The Shavik, like the Zohar says clearly, he is letting go of oil Malchusa de Li'ela, of the yoke of heaven, the notel oil de More, and he is deliberately, willfully taking upon himself the yoke of his master. Oh, Valdo Maksiv, and therefore, what does the pasuk say? That the master has to bring him to the Beis Din. Elokim is not Hashem's name over here. Elokim is the Beis Din. But according to the mystical meaning, we know that the name of Elokim is referring to Malchus, is called Elokim. So you bring him to Elokim. V'gisha eladeles, you bring him to the door because Malchus is the door. V'gisha adoinav Elokim stam, the Zohar says. Legabe ahu asar de pogim le, to the place that he was pogim. And where was he pogim? In Elokim, in Malchus. So you got to bring him to that place. The hachenami Elohim Elokim ikre. Malchus is called Elokim. Ulahan asar yiskarav legabe, and that's why he has to go to that place. Eladeles oyala mezuzah. Why? Begin the hayasar, as I said earlier. This place called Malchus pischuhu de leela. It's the opening to the spiritual realms, to the upper realms. Umezuzah ikre. It's called mezuzah. That's why you bring in eladeles oyala mezuzah. Va'itmar the kivan the achvon la'afkam lahayasar. And since he intended, the first time he was sold, it wasn't his fault so much. But now he's doing it intentionally. So he's being poigim in this place. Because he intended to create a pagam in Malchus, that pagam shows up in his own body. It injures himself. You know, he's carrying the pagam of Hashem, he's carrying it in his own body. The master will bore a hole in his ear. He will serve until Yovel. Okay. Let him stay a servant, not of God, of his master, until the Jubilee year comes. Yovel, that you can't overpower. Malchus you can overpower. You can blemish it. Yovel is such a strong, powerful a revelation of the Eibishter's Malchus and the Eibishter, to the point that it doesn't allow anybody to push it away. So you can be kicking and screaming. Once the 50th year comes, everybody is free. Fine. But now the Zohar, here's the passage of the Zohar that this mimer is explaining. The Zohar is asking, but okay, he's got a blemish. Because he blemished in Malchus, that blemish has got to show up in his body. But why his ear? Why not in a different part of the body? Es oznayamai. Everything has to be perfect. Why the ear? So we've explained it. What? Avol shmiya tole behai asar. Because hearing is dependent on this place. Asiya, action, le'ela, is very high. Action is reverberating very high, but listening is associated with Malchus. We'll begin. That's where the Alter Rebbe, in his mimer that we're going to learn, is having a hard time with the Zohar. On this one passage, what does this mean? The Alter Rebbe, we learned the question earlier. He says, Aloina hapachu, it's the opposite. Malchus is called Asiya, And Bina is called Shmiya, hearing. That this guy didn't have a pagam in his Bina. His pagam is in his Malchus. So why the ear? But let's first read a little further in the Zohar, okay? Because it's very geschmack, the Zohar. We'll begin the Yisrael kat kriva letura de Sinai. And when the Jewish people came to Mount Sinai, to Har Sinai, they have a berechimu de libeu liskar v'lekutche berichu. And they had a very great love to get close to the Eibishter. In other words, if there was ever a time when the Jewish people were in a state of powerful yearning to connect to Hashem, is when Hashem took them out of Mitzrayim and they were on the 49-day journey. According to the Ran, one of the great, right? He explains that the reason for Sfiras HaOmer is because the Jewish people were counting the days. Like a person counts down the days to their wedding. Very exciting. How many days? So that's the real meaning of the counting of the Omer. We couldn't wait to it, so we're counting. So the Zohar says there was such a strong excitement. Akadimu asiya l'shmiya. What is the Zohar saying? I just told you, the Zohar is saying, I just told you that Shmiya, listening, is in Malchus, is the lower place. Asiya, action, is higher. If that's the case, you're supposed to start with listening, with Shmiya, because that's in Malchus. And then you work your way up higher. Because remember we said earlier, Malchus is the entranceway. Malchus is the beginning of the ladder. Zehashar Lashem. Bezois Yavai Aaron. You go through Malchus. Malchus is the first step. If we just said that Malchus is Shmiya, so you have to first hear, and then you get to Asiya, because Asiya is higher. Now we don't understand what this means, because it's the opposite. You're supposed to start with Malchus and go higher. And that would have been action, and then you would go to hearing. But the Zohar says it's not that way. The Zohar says that Shmiya is in Malchus. But now the Zohar has a question. If we're going to say that what? That Shmiya, listening, is in Malchus, and Asiya is higher, then it should have been Nishma first, and then Nasa. Why is it that what? That when they came to Har Sinai, what did they do? They said Nasa v'Nishma. So the Zohar is answering that. And the Zohar says, it's because they had such a love for the Eibishter, they skipped over. They leaped all the way up to Asiya, to action. And then from the action, they stimulated the Shmiya. Which obviously, this is the mimer talks about this later, what that means. In other words, the usual avodah should have been what? Nishma, and then Nas. But because there was such a love, such an intense love, they leaped over many levels. And as he says, Akadimu, they did the opposite. They put Asiya l'shmiya, even though Asiya is le'ela. Asiya is higher. The Shmiya b'kadmaisa u'lebasar Asiya. It should have been, the Zohar says, first Shmiya, first listening, and then action. Shmiya b'hai shmita talia. And Shmiya, because listening is lower, is in the Shmita, in Malchus. Shmita is the 7th year, which is Malchus. And therefore, now the Zohar goes back to the Eved. Who pogim lahai Shmiya? He was pogim in Malchus, which for whatever reason Malchus is called Shmiya, listening. Yispagim Shmiya delay. That's why we have to have a pagam in his hearing. The Yishtar pagim bay, and he should have a pagam in his ear. V'lo Yishtaru avda lamara, and he cannot remain. We don't let him out. We don't say, go do whatever you want. Go choose yourself a servant. First you should feel what kind of blemish you did. We got to first bring him up to Malchus, to Elokim, to Malchus, to the place where he was pogim. And let him become blemished in the blemish that he caused. And let that blemish remain in his ear. And this is the reason you bring him stam to Elokim, which is Malchus. Fine. That's the passage of the Zohar. Now we go back to the mimer. Now we're going to learn Biurei Ha'zohar, the explanation of the Zohar. Okay. So we go to the explanation of the Zohar, which is the next page. And this is what I was sharing with you earlier. If you want one, we have one over here. Is good. Amul is beser. I just need a cup because I'm getting very dry. Is there any cups over there? Literally drying up. I guess there's so much fire. So let me give you a little introduction. He's first going to give us a very, very fascinating insight into the two powers of Riyah and Shmiyah. What is seeing and what is hearing. He's going to talk about what does it mean that Hashem sees and that Hashem hears. What does that mean? That Hashem sees and He hears. I mean, these are human experiences. What does it have to do with the Eibishter? We do find Pesukim that talk about Hashem seeing. Vayar Hashem. Mitzrayim, for instance, it says. She found one? Thank you. Literally, I'm dry as a... Okay. Let's read inside. Let's first make an Agdama and first preface to understand first. What does it mean the Eibishter sees? And what does it mean the Eibishter hears? We say it in davening. What do we say? What's the lashon over there? Hanoita oizen alo yishma. The one who plants an ear, doesn't he hear? Thank you. Hanoita oizen alo yishma. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakal. Anoita oizen alo yishma. If someone anoita oizen yishma haloi. What's the lashon over there? Anoita oizen alo yishma. Something about the eye also. I'm tired now already. Okay. In any case, obviously there is Shmi and Riyah above, but what does it mean? B'yois yedua, it is known. What? When now tefillas we say, open your eyes and see. Vayar Hashem b'sevloisam, Hashem saw their suffering. B'yois ki yedua, it is known. The oiring soif baruch hu moved al merumum. The oiring soif, the infinite one, blessed is He. Atzilus, this is something that we've learned many times. Atzilus is not the Eibishter. Atzilus is a world that's elokus. It is godly, because it's a world that's miyuchid with Hashem, it's unified with Hashem, but obviously the Eibishter is merumam and misnase, infinite levels, a merchak, a distance, beligavul, without an end higher than Atzilus. As it's explained that even from Chachma Atzilus, which is the first of the Sfiris, the Eibishter is beligavul, higher, infinitely higher. Yet the Eibishter descends and unifies Himself with the spheres, with the attributes. When the Eibishter descends in the attributes, then the Eibishter becomes a Chacham, even though He's infinitely beyond Chacham. And the Eibishter, he sees, He hears, even though He's beyond it. So let's explain what that means. The idea of the Oirein Soif Baruch Hu, the Oirein Soif, who moved al merumam, the Eibishter is elevated and separated. Afilu miratzain, even from something as subtle as will. Will, desire, which is a very, very, very undefined type of a thing. What's will? Will is just hatiyas hanefesh. What's will? Will is just the bending of your soul towards something. Chachma, bina, let me give you something. When you're feeling anger, for instance, which is a type of gevura, that's not just pure nefesh. That's already a certain fire in your nefesh. You're upset, you're angry. There's a fire in your nefesh. You're feeling very, very, very emotional. You're feeling very, very loving towards someone. So there is a particular type of feeling in your nefesh. It's almost like there's your nefesh and there is the love that's in that nefesh. You're contemplating or you're comprehending an idea. The idea is the nefesh. The idea is not your nefesh. Your nefesh is apprehending or understanding or comprehending a concept. Your nefesh is now, right? So the idea, the chachma is not the nefesh itself. But when you have a will, what's a will? A will is nothing more than the nefesh. It's the nefesh tilting and bending towards something. That's why in Kabbalah, Keser, crown, which is higher than all the spheres, is associated with Ratzain, with will. Because all the other spheres are already something. Chachma, Bina, Das, it's already something. Keser is nothing other than the Orein Soy. But it's Keser. So it's already a shaykhs to the spheres. Because it's the Orein Sof already desiring something. There is will. And will is just Atiyas HaNefesh. But what does he say? Notwithstanding how lofty will is, the Orein Sof itself is Ein Sof higher even than Ratzah, even than Keser, even than Ratzah. And definitely, if it's higher than Ratzah, than will, it's for sure higher than Chachma and Bina. Because even though we can't say on the Eibishter that he's lacking Chachma, right? But we can't either define him with a positive definition of Chachma, because that's already giving him a specific definition. So he's infinitely beyond Chachma. The only thing we can say about him is that whatever Chachma gives, he doesn't have the chisaron of not having that Chachma, but you can't define him with Chachma because that's a definition of it. But when we say about Hashem, for instance, that Hashem sees, and when we attribute, seeing and vision to God, to Hashem, which we know vision is associated with Chachma. As he says, that the Eibishter sees, which is a property of Chachma, which Chachma is in the brain. But when Chachma comes down into the sensual elements of the body, Chachma expresses itself in vision. Now let me give you a little, just a simple thing for that. What is Chachma? Let's go back to Chachma. We spoke about will. Chachma is your first initial interaction with any concept. Before, what's the difference between Chachma and Bina? We know, and it's Chachma is from the word koyach ma. We're talking about the 45. Today we're connecting to the 45. Koyach ma is 45, is the koyach of Chachma. That's Chachma. Koyach ma, the power of ma. So what is that? So it's explained. It's the first epiphany. When you're learning Gemara, let's say, and you're stuck, you get stuck, you can't figure it out. You thought the pshat was like this, you thought you had a whole buildup. And now you hit a brick wall and you can't, there's literally a block. This whole sugya doesn't make any sense because you have one question and you're banging, it doesn't work. And it's frustrating you. And you're getting, and then suddenly out of nowhere, that you're walking, you're thinking, boom. And there's like this flash. That's the Chachma. So if I stop you at that moment to tell me, okay, you got it, I see. But you can't tell me. Because it's still too abstract. You don't have words for it yet. It's still too up there. When you take that abstract flash and you pass it into your left side of your brain, which is the Bina, which means you start, opening it up and developing it and getting all the details and details of details, that's your Bina. So, Chachma is your first, any concept, any idea, it's you're glimpsing it. That's why it's real. You're glimpsing. So when you see something, when you saw something, you don't know yet what it is. When you look at something, first you saw and you see it. Then later you start analyzing it. You start analyzing on all the parts and all the details and what was it made out of? What's going on? That's already a certain intellectual process that happens afterwards. The Chachma is the first flash. You see the whole picture at once, just as one entity, is one flash. So Chachma is literally the idea of Riyah. Riyah and Chachma is one in it. So how does that apply to the Eibishter? So he says, so how does it apply to Hashem? So this is Chachma, therefore, he says, is a very big hashpala. It's a very, very great descent from the Eibishter, mina atzmus, as Hashem's descending from His self, lios yoideya kol hishtalshalos, that the Eibishter should know the world. Hishtalshalos means the entire progressive order of boundless levels upon levels that follow a certain chain-like order in which realities are created. Our physical world, to us, we think this is reality. This is only the bottom, last chain, link in a chain that goes on and on and on of higher spiritual worlds. Spirit, higher. We're saying the Eibishter's Chachma is that the Eibishter lowers himself down to know. That means to glimpse the creation, to see the creation, to know the worlds. And this knowledge that the Eibishter now knows the world, it's b'derech mashal, it's by way of an analogy. Inyan hariya ba'adam atacht. It is similar to the vision in a human being. Why? When you're looking at something, what's happening when you're looking at something? So now I'm seeing something. So now the truth is like this: most of what's being attracted when my eye hits this water bottle, most of my vision, when I am looking at the water bottle, most of what I am looking at is the part that's colored is probably getting my attention more than the bottom, because it has color, and it's the clearness of this doesn't attract the eye. The eye is generally not attracted to what is colorless and what is not seen. When you see, like for example, you have a white paper that's not much to look at, and there's one black dot on it, everybody notices the black. I send out flyers. I have 300 words on the flyer. Every word is perfect. I have no idea. I don't know how to spell for the life of me. I learned in Belzacheder. I have no idea how to spell. I spell so bad that spell check can't even figure out what the word I want to say. It takes me like 4 or 5 tries till I can play around with every possibility, till spell check can begin to figure out what I want to say and then give me. So I send out a flyer. I have 300 words perfectly. The flyers are gorgeous. Man Yisrael is the best flyers. They're gorgeous, they're nice, they're perfect. And yet, what do the people respond with? They said, you're giving the share for 14 hours? You're starting the share at 11 and you're going till 1 p.m.? That's 1 p.m., 14-hour share, someone tells me. So he saw the entire sign, but he had no comment, not on the fire, not on the Reb Shimon, not on the, nothing. The only thing he found me was on the P instead of the AM, on the, right? So that's the way it is. People find that one thing that's off, and it registers. But he's saying over here an interesting thing about the Adam Atach. When you're seeing something, and you're seeing different colors, that's in the physicality of the thing. When you're looking at this, you're now bringing close to your eye this Gashmias. So the point is like this. Let me put it this way. Your koyach hachachma that you have in your nefesh is primarily, what's your koyach hachachma? Your koyach hachachma is the ability to become aware of things. How do you become aware of how do you become aware of anything? Talking about information. The first encounter that you have with any information is through your chachma. You have the ability to conceive an idea. You read something, you saw. It starts with a flash, with a concept. Then you take that concept and you process the concept and you understand it, right? So hold it. That very same koyach hachachma, which gives you your ability to know, to come into a state of yediyah, of knowledge, your first knowledge of all these, your entire psyche, everything you know about life, everything you know about people, everything you know about reality, it's all coming in your chachma, right? Now, that's a spiritual power. It's a spiritual power. Now, but you also get to know physical things. In addition to all the spiritual stuff, you also get to know there's a table here, there's a chair here. How does that happen? Well, that's the beauty of Chachma going into the eye. When Chachma remains plain in the brain, not in the eye, so the koyach of Chachma gets to know what? Ideas. It gets to know concepts. It gets to know spiritual reality. But when that very same koyach ha-Chachma, ha'ara, a ray of the Chachma, is channeled where? Into your physical eye. Through your physical eye, you're projecting your rays of Chachma. Chachma is a koyach to latch on to things. That's the idea. There's a million svaras, there's a million possibilities to resolve this problem, this mathematical equation, or this taisvis, or this Gemara. See, the Pnei Yeshua gives one shot, and this one gives another shot. It's going to all give different answers. So there's all these possibilities. You're now activating your chachma, and you're seeking. You're like your Wi-Fi. I'll give you an example. You turn your Wi-Fi on. What does the Wi-Fi do? It starts seeking something that it can latch itself onto. It says, that shows you this one is locked, that one is locked. You're looking for where you can latch into. Your koyach ha-chachma is a koyach in your nefesh that is able to spot something, latch, but that koyach is first the spiritual koyach. How does it now get you to suddenly notice there's a cup on the table? How do you have that chachma experience with that? And that will bring this cup into your reality. Then you can sit and contemplate the cup is made out of paper. Is it recyclable? Is it not recyclable? Is it good for the environment? Is it not good for the environment? Should I get plastic cup? Should I get paper cup? You can make Titus and make a whole everything. That's analyzing something that entered already into your sphere of consciousness. But how does it enter? It enters through your chachma. But your chachma is really a koyach ruchni. It's a spiritual koyach, which is meant to receive ideas. How does it start bringing in reality into gashmias? That's because chachma goes into your eye. And when chachma is now going in your eye, through your eye, it scans the physical space around you, and you become aware. There's a chair, and here there's a bottle, and here's a table, and here's a thing. So, as he says, you're bringing it close to your eye, that gashmias. V'gam mitchila haya koyach hachmasai beriyazu ad sheniskarev el hageshem v'nisachedimai. I don't know what he means with this lashon over here. V'gam mitchila, also in the beginning, the ispashtus of his koyach chachma was in this vision, in this idea. Ad sheniskarev el hageshem v'nisachedimai. I don't know what he means with gam mitchila. I'm not clear on that. So until he got close to this gashmiistic thing, and you bond with it, because now it enters your consciousness. So now we'll understand what does it have to do with what does it mean Hashem sees? Kain al derech mashal, so in the same way, by way of analogy, ksiv mishamayim hibit Hashem. The Eibishter as well looks down from heaven. V'chein vayar Hashem, and Hashem looks. What does that mean? Hashem looks. From the essence of the Eibishter's Chachma, which is above. So the Eibishter lowers his Yediyah to know to know everything that's going on, even the smallest, tiniest little entities that are taking place within the world. The Eibishter knows it all. How is he knowing it all? He's knowing it all through you say, Eine Hashem. Hashem is looking. Shekvar nimtzu memenu. That's interesting. Why don't you say that by us, you have a very big question, which I don't exactly have the answer right now. You could ask a question. Bishloim, I can't know the cup because I'm not the source of this cup. This cup exists outside of me. This water bottle exists outside of me. I am me. I exist only within this small little space of me. I'm not this, I'm not that. How am I becoming aware of the cup of the thing? So when I see it, So that's what's now, as he said earlier, Niskariv Imoy, I get close to it, Vinisachid Imoy. I make a connection, I become unified. Now the cup is part of my reality. In my spatial reality, I know I have a cup. I have to be careful. I can't walk there because there's a chair there. There's a thing that becomes part of my sense of what's there. That's us. He's saying the Eibishter gets to know the world. Oy, that thing needs to, I think, is it look more like a, I feel like it's burning more than, anybody sense that? Or that's just that it caught my attention through my rear right now? That flame up there. Does it feel like it's burning something? It's not. Okay, I don't know why. All right. That middle one. Okay. But here's the question. By Hashem, oops. Used to last 5 hours. What happened, Aryeh? I guess you have to come practice. We have to do it slowly, week by week. We'll stretch you. Take care. In any case, so my question is, when it comes to Hashem knowing the world, we know the Rambam uses the term, the Eibishter doesn't have to know with the Yediyah shechutz le'atzmo. So he doesn't have to know the world because he happens to see it. He knows it because he knows himself. The whole world is emanating from him. So what does he mean over here? Let's read the words over here. Hashem is looking. Hashem sees. It came down from the essence of the Eibishter's Chachma. The Yediyah to know everything. Just like in the human being. The Koyach HaChochma in the Nefesh descends, because the Koyach HaChochma in the Nefesh is a very spiritual, abstract power. But when you're actually looking at something, what's happening? That Koyach HaChochma is descending through your eye to latch itself on, like we discussed earlier, to something physical. He's saying similar to that. The Eibishter is beyond. For him to set his consciousness, so to speak, his awareness of a davar hanimtza in the gashmistic world, not just the gashmistic world, even the ruchnistic world. For Hashem so it's through a riyah. Leida kol hanimtzos, but this bothers me. He says to know all the things that come into being, shekvar nimtzu mimenu, that came already out from him. But if they came already out of him, then he already knows them. What are we talking over here? That there's some kind of a riyah, some kind of a vision that he gets after. Again, I'm not saying this because I want to give a pshetel over here. I'm Pasha telling you that there's something over here that I'm lacking in understanding. I don't know. But as I told you, I'm not teaching you tonight from what we know. We're going to learn from what we don't know. So let's see if we get some understanding. And then there can be the Eibishter's riyah in the mohus, in the substance of one particular nimtza. The Eibishter knows this. He knows that. Kamoi, just like she'ein hagashmi tisamtzim lirois b'marois kav prati shebahar b'marois. It's like, you ever have a situation like this? You're looking at a magnificent painting. And the magnificent painting, let's say it's hanging in your mother's dining room and it's there in your mother and parents' home. And this is a painting that has been there since your childhood. It's on the wall. You looked at this picture literally a few thousand times. Well, I guess I'm thinking this because I was just at my parents' home for Shabbos. I wasn't in Borough Park for Shabbos 13 years. I just had this past Shabbos. I was back. I went to visit a lot of times, but not for Shabbos. We didn't have a family. And now I was there, so I'm thinking about like a picture on the wall. You grew up with it. This was the picture that was there for 40 years. Now sometimes you're sitting and you're like a little daydreaming and you're looking at that picture, a picture that you saw a million times, and suddenly you start like noticing like a certain coloring in it or a certain part of it that you never ever like paid attention to. So amongst all the various different like aspects of this painting. So much different colors, so many different lines, so many different things. You're happy to right now latching your vision onto one particular line, one kav. That's what he says over here. Sometimes the eye can ignore everything and laser focus lirois bemaris kav prati, and to see on one particular line shebahar bemaris, which is amongst many colors, as explained elsewhere. So the same is by the Eibishter, the fact that he's mitzamtzim his riyah to see the small little details and sub details of our lives and of creation. The Eibishter knows everything and sees everything in literally. That's called the Hashem's riyah. Now, the chiddush over here and the very geschmacke Inyan over here is when he describes shmiyah. And what's the shmiyah? What's the hearing? The hearing in Hashem's ears. Who al derech mashal, by way of analogy, oizen ha'adam atach, the human's ear. Sheskula, so what's the segula of the ear? What's the power of the person's ear? Likloit b'toichai kol hakoilos. The ear takes in sound. Okay, through your ear, it's where the inlet of sound is going through the ears. But what is the ear doing? The ear has the ability to be boichen, to be mavchin. Mavchin means to differentiate. It is differentiating between good and bad in the ear. Ki yadua, as it is known. He seems to be talking about something. Ki yadua, as it is known. That the ear acts as a very, it takes in bein tav lebish. What does that mean? Maybe it means, obviously he's not talking over here on a moral level that it says that when you're supposed to hear good things, you're not supposed to hear bad things. When you hear Lashon Hara, you're supposed to tune you out. When you hear good things, what does he mean over here? The ear is boiching. I think he's talking about something very physical. It's something to do with the hearing process that it differentiates between tav and lebish, between good sound and not good sound. But I think possibly, no, but it can't be. It can't be the same idea of the eye. By the eye, he also said you're focusing in on one akuda, and you ignore it. Because technically, you can say, "I'm giving a shir right now." At the same time, the air conditioner is making a noise, and these boys were bringing up tables and chairs. They cracked back there. The air conditioner is making its noise, and yet there's a shir going on. And if you're interested in the shir, then you block out all other background sound, and you're hearing. So even though the hearing is going in, but it's like it's not being focused on, and the ear it'd be a mavchin, tav lebish. And he doesn't give much. Wait, he doesn't give much commentary on it. He says, "Kein derech mashal lamayla." The last three have to stay till the end. You know that. They have to stay at least a zumen. Mizumen. Okay. Mizumen. Kein derech mashal lamayla. The same is also above. Chinis hashpolos mevin v'loy bebina. The Eibishter lowers himself down into mevin v'loy bebina yadua. But it's lios mevin umavchin. Very interesting description on the bina. That Eibishter is doing what? He is mevin umavchin. He is understanding and differentiating. Talumois levav b'nei adam. The deeper secrets of a human heart. Bein tav lebish, between good and what's not good. Kamoi. The Eibishter Shmiya is a different procedure than the Eibishter's Riyah. The Riyah is the etzem registering of every prat in the creation. The Eibishter sees Yankel, Moshe, Chaim, Yankel, Johnny, Tom, whatever. He's on top of everything, knowing every prat of the creation. But then there is another Indian. There is a Havchana. What's the Havchana? The Havchana is a much more sensitive type of a thing. All people are davening. Everybody's doing mitzvahs. But the Eibishter senses that there's one yid amongst all of the yidden that his mitzvah is being done with all of his heart. It's totally emes, totally real. He's fully there. The Eibishter senses that someone else there's a lot of ulterior motive in that mitzvah. There's a lot of show. There's a lot of impression. He wants to impress this. He wants to impress. There's a lot of chitzonius. So that's not called truth. He's not serving with emes. The koyach of the Eibishter shmiya. It's interesting. You would think, you think there might be riyah. No. It's in the shmiya of Elokus where he has that sense, where he picks up. He's shemeya umevin ma'aseh b'nei adam, all the deeds of persons, to evaluate the quality of the service. The what happens through the riyah, but the havchana. Well, if you think about what's in chachma and bina, chachma is the etzem nekuda. The bina is in a very evaluation. The bina is already understanding. Understanding means it's processing, it's analyzing. So in the same is also between riyah and shmiya. The riyah picks up. The shmiya is already concerned with the details, and I guess that's what he means earlier. There's much more of a filtering or a process taking place in the shmiya, because the shmiya is far more engaged in the details. That could be, as he says, there's a little bit of falsehood. That's mixed in a very deep place in the heart, even though to the eyes of a flesh and blood, it looks like this person is 100% sincere and real. But above, to the Eibishter's ears, that evaluates and is mafchin the pnimius. Mafchin hasheker shema'uriv b'toich levavai. Can chas v'shalom sense if there is a certain dishonesty in the heart. The nimtza comes out. Shekamoi ba'odam agashmi, just like in the physical human. Mafchin ba'oznoi, the ear is a hakoyach avchana, lekoil ra or koil toiv. To a koil ra, a negative koil, or a koil toiv, kein al derech zeh avchanas pnimius alev. The chol hanimtzos, you know what? People really say that. You know, you find that people will say that. I hear in the tone of your voice that you're upset at me. I hear in the tone of your voice that you're, the other day, Mamish, I learned this yesterday in the morning. I said, I got to teach something of it. I can't say I learned it. I skimmed through it. And as I was learning it, I knew that in 2 hours later, I had to talk to my landlord about this place, because during COVID, we were literally paying bupkis, and he's coming after me now to pay up as retroactively. So I don't know. I know that, but we had a. It's no more the owner that you know. It's no more their fellows. They sold the building. Yeah, it's not them. You know already the owner. No, it's not them. They've sold it to not a Jewish people. Any case, so whatever. So I was gearing up to have a very confrontational call, because I had proof that I had told them that I'm not looking to pay this money later. I'm paying whatever I could pay now. And the guy was telling me, the real estate manager, yeah, don't worry. Meanwhile, they kept on billing me the old bill, but he kept on going, don't worry about that, just whatever. So I felt it was deceptive in a certain way. So I was going to go all out. And then I when I was learning this later, even as a thing, is that people can hear, if you're confident, they get up, if you're talking beroiges and with anger, they go into confrontational gear. If you're talking, so I changed my whole voice. I had the nicest conversation with the guy. It was fantastic. And then I realized he was so soft. By the time we were done, we were like best friends. Okay, we got to figure it out still, but it was, and it's all the tone of voice. You can be saying the same thing. It's how you're talking, how you're there. So by learning this, it mellowed it, because I became aware, because I said, how is he going to hear this? If I'm coming and firing a big cannon right at the beginning of a conversation, there's no good. I gotta. So it's interesting. The ear has that havchana between koil ra, koil tov. right? It's amazing, really, how much we already, you speak to someone over the phone, and our minds already create a whole sense of what kind of person it is. Our mind, literally, you didn't even meet the guy, you didn't even see the person. You just heard them, and in the brain, you're already like, just from Shmiya. It's interesting. The nimtza comes out, a negative voice, or that is the Eibishter's havchana, to be mavchin, what's going on in the innermost of the heart, the cholanim tzoyes of all creations, af she'enam koilos. That's interesting. We can only be mavchin when you're hearing someone's voice. But we can't be mavchin what's taking place deep in the person's heart. But the Eibishter hears the hearts. See, it's an amazing idea. We only hear voices. We hear speech. Hashem hears the heart. He hears Pnimius Alev. And by hearing Pnimius Alev, he can hear, the subtleties, the subtlety of subtleties that there is in a person's avodah. The cholanim af she'enam koilos, who mepchina shmiya d'li'ela. That's part of the shmiya that happens above. Sheshemeya Hashem ba'oznoi, the Eibishter hears in his ears. Ikeshenimtza nekudas liboy l'toiv. And when the Eibishter finds that the person's nekudas halev is good, as a yakshiv Hashem, the Eibishter listens up to the person's tefillah, let's say, the yishma lo'oiden midas chasta, and that will be ma'oiden the Eibishter's chesed on that person. Ubehepich, and if chas v'sholom the opposite. Sha'ara nifchan, the Eibishter shmeksois. I'm not using smell, but it's here. He hears a certain whatever. Ozev vayishma Hashem. What does the pasuk say? Vayichar apoy. There's a pasuk that Hashem heard and Hashem got upset. Ukedayim v'day lamev. So now he sets out that Riyah gives us bichlal the connection for the connection for the etzem nim. In the Riyah you know what is, and in the Shmiya you know how is, right? Okay. But he's asking a very interesting question. Comes out according to this that Shmiya has a certain is operating on which level? It's operating in the more spiritual realm, because the Shmiya is far more sensitive to the nuances, the more to the kavana, to the intention. The Riyah is picking up on what? On the etzem metzias of it, on its existence. And in this case, it's gashmias, the gashmias of things. Now, which koyach is a higher koyach in the nefesh? Which koyach ha-nefesh is a deeper koyach? Riyah is much deeper than Shmiya. Riyah is a higher koyach ha-nefesh. Chochmah is higher than Bina. So therefore it's more ruchni, it's more spiritual. So it should have been that ruchni, the koyach ha-riyah, which is more ruchni, which is more spiritual, should have been have that sensitivity and would be exploring in the realm of spirituality, in the spirit, which is more intention and so on and so forth, quality, and Shemiya, which is more physical or lower koyach hanefesh, should therefore what's it called again? Be connected to more the picking it should attach itself to physical. In other words, you should hear physicality and see more the. Why is it that Vayishma Hashem, that the koyach Hashem, both by Hashem and by us, the koyach of Shmiya is a koyach to pick up on more subtleties. And Bechlal, what do you hear? What do you, even physically? Sight sees what? Physicality. In literal sight, what do you see? You don't see seeing. I'm not talking about the koyach. Pashat seeing. What do you see? You can only see physical things. You can't see something spiritual. Hearing is sounds. Sounds are not ruchni, sheberuchni, the sound waves, but they're still very, very edel-agashmi. They're ruchni shebegashmi. It's more spiritual than physical. Yet sound is in the ruchni, and sight is in gashmi. even though sight comes from chachma, which is a much higher koyach hanefesh, and shmiya comes from bina, which is a much lower koyach hanefesh. That's his question. Chachma is higher than bina. The lama, why is it hariya hushpala kolkach? Riya comes down so low, which means the chachma comes down so low, lamata liyas mabit begeshem, in order to look and see the gashmias of things. Ulamaylo hu b'chenas hayediyah, and above by the Eibishter, what does it mean? It's his yediyah begufam shel geshem hanimtzais, in the guf, in the body of the material of everything that exists. Ushmiya, and hearing, shehu bebina, that is in bina, hu dakus, is so fine, ha'afchana bepnimiyas hageshem. What does the oizen do? What does the shmiya do? It gives you a ha'afchana in the pnimius of the geshem, what the intentions are. What would that be? Indian, the idea is, Piyoski Yaduan is known. Zera Geshmak Indian. Shekol Shehu Yoiser Gevoya. Anybody that is higher, Biyoiser Yachel Lahashpil Atzmai. The higher something is, the lower, the farther away it can extend itself, and the lower it can go. So how do you know that the biggest chacham, the most wisest of all chachmas, Shlomo HaMelech was able to hang out even with the shaitan, even with the fools. And Shlomo HaMelech was able to bring down his chachma even to little children and say parables. And he could have been a little rebbe for second grade, Shlomo HaMelech. Even though he was chacham dayech kami kol adam. And that's Adonov, that's the testament to the chachma, that you can simplify things so simple till you bring it down and speak like someone who's not as high has to stay closer to his range. The higher you go, the higher the source, the farther it can extend. And for that reason, chachma, because it's such a high and therefore limitless power, it can go and extend itself to even connect and even to gashmi, to see things that are very, very low, which is material. Shmiya is not so expansive because it's not so high. So it has to stay closer to the range of the koyach. And the range of it's a koyach ruchni. So it has to remain within the vicinity of ruchniyas. It can't go out of ruchni and into the lower domain of gashmi because it's not such a limitless power like koyach hariya, which is a higher koyach in the nefesh, and therefore less limitation. And because it has less limitation, it can go down low. Kol hagavoya yoiser yoyred lamata yoiser. It arrives to the end of something. Beautiful. Because it is talking about Shmiya. Because it is Rishon Yoiser. Because it is higher. So to a Chachma, because it's the beginning, to spashit koicha mata ma'oid. Its koyach goes down low. Shmiya that's in Bina, is the door open there? Yid zingt sich an Igen. The power of Shmiya that's in Bina is not able. It can't connect to the Gashmias of the domain. It can scan the intentions, the motives, which is Ruchni. You see, very geschmack Indian. Sheyesh har bechayis bekoyach hariya mema sheyesh bekoyach hashmiya. When you see something, even though seeing is seeing the Gashmians, there's much more energy in Riyah, there's much more chayos, which means there's much more hispailos in seeing than in hearing. What do we see? Sharei hispailos hanefesh, the excitement of the soul, tia min Riyah, when you see something, will be harbe ma'oid yoisem min hashmiya kiyadua, more than when you're hearing. Sight is the most powerful of our senses. Chazal say, you can't compare it. To the degree that a person, in other words, if you, what, yeah. What is it? Oh yeah, you're seeing it. You can push it, see farther. Yeah. And hearing is only closer. But also the Yespilus, and I was talking about the Yespilus Hanefesh from seeing. That's why the Allah is Ein Ed, not Ein Ed Nasadayin. What is the lashon over there? Yeah, Ein Ed Nasadayin. A judge can't be someone who saw. Because if you saw something, there's no way you can detach yourself a little bit and analyze it, because it has such a deep impact that you would cart. So many times, we hear about things, and it's a fascinating thing, and it excites us. But then we want to visit that place and look at it. And when you look at it, it's like on a whole new level. It's as if you never knew it before. Now, because you went and you saw it. You say, I saw it with my own eyes. It leaves such a deep imprint because there's much more chayas. V'nimtza comes out. The nefesh is more invested. The nefesh itself, which is the source of energy, is more invested in Riyah. There is much more koyach hanefesh in Riyah. Ubeshmiya nishpa chayos ma'at. And in Shmiya, there's far lesser chayos hanefesh, life of the nefesh. Ma'at meze'er, alkein, loy tispol kol kach. A person does not have so much his spoilers, so much excitement. B'shmiyas davar toiv, when he hears something nice, kamosha to spoil, like he would get excited. Im tireh hadavar hatoiv v'ira, if you see the good thing or the opposite. U'ulas kleya ayin v'oizen. So you see there's more chayas. You see much more chayas in Riyah and Shmi. But that's in terms of the chayas hanefesh. But u'be'ulas kleya ayin v'oizen. When it comes to the actual pu'ula of the physical eye and the physical ear, behepach. Sha'ashmiya b'pnimiyas hanefesh. Hearing is more pnimiyas hanefesh, the sense, lahafchin kanal, it's mafchin. When you're hearing, you can hear. U'pu'ula sa'ayin hu ba'abata merachik b'koyach nivdal shebenefesh. It's interesting. I think what he's saying is, when you're hearing something, it's like you're taking it in. Where are they singing from? I can't figure this out. Well, what do they have the music out? It's okay. It's closed. We're talking about Shmiya, and it's having such an impact on me. See? What's happening in Shmiya? In Shmiya, you're hearing inside. Riyah is you're seeing outside. You see from the level of the spilos that there's much more nefesh here. But yet, where is Riyah going? Outside. Because that's the whole idea. That everything that is higher in the essence of the soul, its pu'ula goes out further. That's why we find that Hashem is mashpil himself to see b'shamayim v'aretz. She'ikar sibers toldos hamidos al yoines lamayla b'atzilus. The main siba, the main cause of the Eibishter's emotion, so to speak, the midos above that become stimulated. Im chasadim ay gevuros. If the Eibishter is going to be in a state of chesed, like Hashem's reaction is very, very chesedic, very loving and very kind, or chas v'sholem gevura, that there is a harshness. It all starts with Riyah. The Eibishter lowers himself down to see, to look. Where do you find? Hashem saw the cries of the Bnei. It's interesting. It uses He saw the cries. Interesting. It doesn't say he saw the naka, which naka is a cry, which Piddish, but he explains, Sheguf hameridus v'hashibud niskarev l'Hashem. The actual bitterness and the actual shibud, the guf of it, the physicality of it, was niskarev el Hashem b'bchinas riyah shebachachma. In other words, it was focused. The Eibishter was very focused on the fact that what? There is enslavement, there's suffering, there's a lot of pain. V'nasa, and it became, his spilus ha'atzmos elokus, this caused in his spilus an awakening above. B'moed, like it says, Vayar Hashem, right? V'achakach. But after the initial vision, where Hashem looked at the world and saw their suffering, and as a result of that had a powerful sense of rachamim, v'achakach, and afterwards, hushpala lihispilus ketana himenu. The vision caused the very big spilus. Afterwards, there was a lesser spilus. What's that? Lahavchen b'shmiya, to be boichen through hearing. Why? Kamoi ba'anshe Sedaim, like by people of Sedaim. It says Shabbat Sakasam b'pchinish. What does it say? Right, when the Eibishter comes down to Sedaim, what does he say? Ve'es Sakasam, what's the lashon? Haba Sakasa haba alai. But there it only mentions Shmiya. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say. Shmiya levad. Over there was only a Shmiya, not a Riyah. But by the Yidden in Mitzrayim, there was a Riyah. Then, through the Hafchana of Shmiya, which comes after the Riyah, there is a Hafchana for good or for bad. When you're hearing a sweet voice, a pleasant voice, Yismach levavoi, he will get very happy. This was the line that actually changed my whole conversation. Because he says, when the person hears a koil arev, it's pleasant, it's sweet, Yismach levavoi, it causes a gladdening of the heart, that you want, it evokes chesed, kindness, or rachamim, or it evokes mercy. Ubehepech. When you're hearing anger and you're hearing this, to smarmer on nefesh, it causes you get bitter. You get upset. So that's like this. By Mitzrayim, first there was what? A riyah. It's hard to understand what he wants over here. First there was a riyah. And what did the riyah accomplish? A big hispilus from the etzem inyan of their suffering. And then it says, Vayishma Hashem. By Mitzrayim too. First Riyah and then Shmiya. V'chein al derech mashal metalumei salev d'chol ha'nimtzayis, ya'oirer b'shmiya d'liyela, what will it be ma'oirer? L'tavai l'bish. A good response or not such a good response? U'meshmiya l'tav, and when the Eibishter is hearing something good, yum shach midas chesed atzilus, this will draw forth the midah of chesed, or rachamim aklula mechesed de gemura, or rachamim that is both. Ubehepech, and the opposite. Vayichar apoy, the Eibishter gets upset. Shemin halos ma'isem roi meshebetalum ma'isle levav b'nei adam misoider min ha'avchana lebish midas hakas va'aroiges. This evokes the midah of anger and wrath. Sheyichar apoy dezah, that there should be an upsetness chas v'sholem of the ze'er ampin. Ze'er ampin is the midah sabah. K'moshe kasev Allah oshan ba'apoy, that smoke went up in his v'amam kazeh u'mebchinas kav smoil. Okay, hold on. So what do we have over here? The riyah of the Eibishter what? Is the etzem goes down lower, and it is sensitive to what? What does that pick up? The etzem in yonim that are happening. The etzem mitzias agashem. The etzem situation, it's not good. What does the shmiya do? What is the shmiya doing? I'm just trying to figure out what does he want over here. Benegay to Yidna Mitzrayim. Their physical suffering, the Eibishter saw through the riyah. Like over there, what was the havchana l'tava l'bush or l'bish? What was that havchana, as he says? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Where's he going with this? What's Vilada? The Poil Mamish in Mitzrayim, what was the difference between Vayar Hashem and Vayishma Hashem? Because there it says also Vayar Hashem and then Vayishma Hashem is Nakasa. Vayishma Hashem is what's the Lashon? It definitely mentions in Mitzrayim both Riyah and Shmiyah. What? Oh, he's getting back now. I'm getting there right now. Hold on. This kas that comes up when chas v'shalom, there is avchana l'ra. It's still in a level of atzilus, which means it's totally still a type of anger that's totally godly, meaning it's a lakus. It's a very deep inner state of, you know what it says? I'll give an example to that. Shlomo Melech, the night that he built the Beis Hamikdash, the night of the Binyan Abayis, Shlomo Melech also got married to the daughter of Pari. So it says that the Eibishter was b'yom simchas libay. There was no simcha to Hashem like the day the Beis Hamikdash was built. That was like the ultimate shchina b'tachtonim. Ultimate Mishkan was only a temporary. This is the real deal. Well, now they want to come in. Sorry. The Eibishter's Hashem was b'simcha gemura. But what does it say? On that very night, because Shlomo Melech got married to the daughter of Paroi, it says that on that very night the Eibishter also got upset. Ad kedei kach that Hashem sent Malach Gabriel down, and he put a notes kana, he put a stick in the Mediterranean, and it started to gather a reed, and it became the boot, which is Italy, which eventually did what? It destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash, Italy, but it was a continuation because he married the daughter of Pari. Now, Bechitzonius, on the outside realm, no one can pick up that the Eibishter was upset. Because on the Chitzonius, it was all wedding. The Chitzonius was all simcha rabba, but deep in the primus nekudas alev, there was a dissatisfaction of what happened. When he says, when we're talking over here as a result of Hashem's sensitivity to the nuances through Shmiya, in which he hears the koilos of the heart and can see what's real and what's not real. He hears all these koilos, and based on coming from us, from all of creation, and based on that evaluating, no, what kind of a response? He says all of this, even when it chas v'shalom produces a more of a harsh response, it's not practically going to be dinim, judgments, punishment. Something is there. It's still deep in the heart of the king. As he explains over here, look. It's not like they can see on his face that he's angry and all the makatrigim are coming and say, oh, there we go, let's go, lash out. Because on this level, it's still beyond the level of ra, of chas v'sholom punishment. Even ra, even it's achrak midas hamishpit misoider beleva elyon. In the supernal heart is ma'oider and inyan chas v'sholom of midas hamishpit. Misham nimshach midas hamishpit zeh b'dibura elyon. When that mishpat comes down into the divine speech, into Hashem's words, that's when he's like giving already a tzivoy, chas v'sholom, to punish someone, hamoidin, that is rebelling, then it's gonna actualize. Then it's considered din. and ra meaning it's a bad, it's a punishment, it's something bad. When it's still taking place deep in the recesses of the heart, it hasn't yet manifested in speech. It's still miyuchad in the essence of the king, and therefore on that level, that's discussed elsewhere. That means that the real din, and that's why it says the real judgment start in Malchus. Malchus is speech. When the king, but on the deeper levels, in the Ze'er Anpin, which are the emotional range, over there, even if there's dinim, it's not lepoil. It will eventually, could come with a poil, but at that point, it's not yet. Fine. So what do we really have over here is, it starts with the Eibishter having Riyah. Riyah is the etzem mitzias of the Mitzayim comes into his focus, in his lens. He is now focused on the fact. Now, Riyah is all the time. Eine Hashem is pekuchais. It's all over. Ayin, we say, three things a person, ayin roya. That's always. There is the Indian of Ayarash during Golus. Sometimes it looks like Hashem is sleeping, which means his eyes are closed. But we're saying this a particular moment. Vayarash. What's the Indian of Riyah? Is that we come into focus, and that there is it registers what's going on down here. Shmiya is doing what? Much more than just that registering. It's the sensing of the pneumius of everything that's happening down here. Okay, fine. Now, what comes out from all of this? The shmiya, the le'ela, hamaledas hamidas, the shmiya, the hearing of above that gives birth to the midas. What's asiyah? Asiyah is when the Eibishter speaks and says, punish him, give chesed here. That's asiyah. The Eibishter's asiyah is in Malchus. The shmiya by Hashem is much higher. It's even before the emotions. The shmiya creates the emotions. The riyah and the shmiya of what's happening scan the earth, and as a result, both of the riyah, which brings the etzem in it, and the shmiya and the sensitivity of everything that's happening, all of that information creates the mood, so to speak, in the emotions above, from the Eibishter's midos, and from those midos will eventually come down into the range of the Eibishter's asiyah, which is in Malchus, which is dibur, and dvar, and kikein tziva hamelech. Once it's already in a state of tziva hamelech, it's already executed. So comes out, according to this, that oizen and shmiya is much higher than asiyah. Because asiyah is shu adibur elyon shemetzave bepekudas malchus tatzilus. Malchus tatzilus, which is the shechina, gives a pekida. Liyos shefa toiv oira bigvul mamish. There should be shefa toiv oira bigvul mamish, means literally in this physical world, as opposed to in the olamais ein soif that's taking place where the emotions are, where it's still not gvul. It's a feeling, it's a mood, it's a state of excitement that's taking place. Something. It's not yet in the tangible, fixed reality of creation. So asiyah then is much lower, and shmiya is much higher. He says, however, that's the way it is mumayla lamata, from up down. Chachma bina, riyah shmiya, and then it goes down into asiyah. From the recipient's side, from the nivrayim, from the creations, there's a hepach. And why? And so all of this was only a preparation for the question that Chakonish didn't begin to answer. Remember, the Zohar says that the Eved is a pegamin where? In Malchus. And yet, what do we say? That we go in the air, which is in Shmiya, and the Zohar says Shmiya is lower, and Asiyah leyela. What kind of business is that? Especially based on what we learned now. So he says, "Na'amna masha amar kam bezoyar, the Shmiya b'malchus, va'asiyah le'ela. Eina kavana al Shmiya de le'ela." We're not talking about the Eibishter's Shmiya. B'matzil, as it is in the emanator, which is him. La'kakavana al Shmiya de latata. We're talking about our hearing. Milmata l'mayla, from down up. What does that mean? The nahapachu. Sha'asiya lamayla hemena. Asiya is higher. What does that mean? Biurei Ha'zohar. And the explanation of the matter is very geschmack. This is very good. When the Zohar says Asiya reaches very high, is the concept of soif ma'isa b'machshava tchila. What does that mean? Soif ma'isa b'machshava tchila. That the ultimate satisfaction of the Eibishter's Ratzon, of the Ratzon Elyon, is only realized when there is Asiyas HaMitzvahs. Like we say, Soif Davar Hakol Nishma, Yekim Yerev Zesmois of Shemoir Kizek Al Adam. Asiyas HaMitzvahs, as we say, Soif. And what does that mean? B'machshava tchila. Higher than everything, higher than Al Inyanim is the Soif Ma'isa, the actual deed. Dahainu, but he says, Al Derech Mashal Sheyitzav HaMelech Livnois Binyan Kach V'Kach. When a king commands, you should make a binyan. Or you should go. King commands, you should go travel somewhere, go somewhere. If the king is only a king who's running his country based on something what's substantial, if he's an intelligent ruler, and so on and so on. So if he is making a whole project, it's because he has a certain kavanah. He wants something over here with them. But as a king, he doesn't reveal his kavanah in his ratzon and his rachma to the people in the country. He only is megala the tzivoy and the pekuda. Levad. Sheyivnu, they should build, or sheyelchu, or they should go. They don't have to know anything of the Tielis in this Asiyah. That's when they were kings, when they were monarchs. In a democracy, it doesn't work that way. In democracy, the king has to try to explain what he's doing and what, where, and when. And after many times, that's after much time, and the project is finished. Sometimes they don't even chop at the end of the project. What was this for? But when they see 10 years, 15, then so now they understood why it was so important to lay the foundation based on all of this on this side. When they heard the pekuda of the king, to the recipient, the shmiya means what? See, he's turning the different. There's a shmiya, our shmiya and the Eibishter shmiya. The shmiya as it is above and the shmiya that it is below is a different type of shmiya. But the Eibishter shmiya, when he says he's shemeya, what's the shemeya? Is an inyan of avchana. He's being mafchen in the pnimius of the kavana of the person doing a mitzvah. The Eibishter hears the kavana. Person is doing something. Do you really mean it? Was it real Avos Yisrael? Was it really care? Or were you thinking, that I'll do him today? He'll do something he'll move my car next week. First day, was it? I really had empathy for him? I really cared about him or not? So the Eibishter is hearing those subtleties. When it comes to the people hearing the king, what kind of hearing do we need? It says, "Alu Shemei Amizevach Toiv." The Eibishter says to Shem got upset at Sholana. And he wanted to bring korban. He said, listening is more. What kind of listening are we talking about? Listening over there, it doesn't mean listening to what, that you understand the kavanah in it, because that's not the inyan. We're talking about listening means the folks. It's actually to listen, to comply. And to comply means to comply with what I say, just as pekuda, because I said so. Hold on. They don't have the sensitivity in the intention. It's the opposite of the core level of shmiyah. As he puts it, it's only hearing what I need to do. But the main service of an evet Adonai, and a servant does not need an over analytical slave. That doesn't work in a The slave that's over analyzing every single thing, but I thought, but and I was trying to figure out what your kavana is. The guy is fartik. Sheyasa, the other one's compliance. Sheyasu tziva ya'adin, what he told him. Mebli de sheyeda shum macham. You don't have to know any intention. The tayelas tzivu zeh, and the tayelas, the outcome of it. Sheimu yodeya eza tayelas v'kavana zu ein zu avoda. That's not called serving. Why? Then you're serving based on the. Then you like the outcome. That means I appreciate this. I appreciate that the community is going to have this beautiful park, and I can appreciate my kids will go. So if I'm doing it, b'shem the king building this park, and I understand what it is. The king sent me here to chop trees, and I'm wondering why in the world is he clearing or whatever to clear. Well, the king's making a park, and he's wants to put a children's, swings and monkey bars and sliding ponds, and it's going to be a beautiful children's park. For that, he wants to clear all these beautiful trees, knocking it off. So if the guy is he over analyzes everything, he's a servant, trying to figure it out. If let's say he taka figures out, because he asks around, he's always curious. He speaks to the top advisors. He says, "Oh, they're building a park." So when he's doing it and the park is beautiful, he has his own eneklach that he's happy I'm going to go to the park, or his children. So based on that, is he doing it for himself? He's not doing it for the king. So that's not called servitude. If a person does something for himself, you're going to call it avoida. That's not even called working. Working is shver arbit, and that's when you doing something because you're going to gain something. That's not really called work. When we say shmiya by an eved, it means action. Now, it doesn't mean doing the action. It means listening and being ready to do the action, accepting to listen. That's the idea. Without knowing the kavin, rak avoidus v'oil malchus, rak the avoid and the oil malchus. So it's interesting. He's explaining how the main ikr inyan of malchus shamayim is what? Shmiyah. Listening to the commandment of Adon Kol Haaretz, v'lasos, and to do kamoi she'amar, like he says. No, I'm sorry, kamoi she'kasav, like it says. Hinei shemoya mizevach toiv. It brings that pasuk. Kamoi she'kasav makam acher, as stated elsewhere. V'zer she'amar kan sha'shmiya b'hayasar talya. That shmiya is dependent on malchus, because when the king speaks, what's our receiving? What's at the receiving end of the king's commanding? Shmiya. Pirish b'malchus tatzilus dafka. Dafkin malchus. Hashmiya shalem mekablim talya. The king is it doesn't, when the king is mitzav and there's no mekablim, there's no malchus. That's a disruption of the malchus. So pirish b'malchus tatzilus dafka hashmiya shalem mekablim talya b'pchinas asiya levad kanal. Meaning just the doing, not the understanding of what the doing is all about. Ki dibere elyon the malchus datzilis hein shoymin, because they hear the dibere elyon of malchus. The shmiya zu ubilti hasaga b'pnimiyas hatzivui. It's without hasaga and without understanding b'pnimiyas hatzivui. B'ratzene elyon v'chachmasa shebechol mitzvah. What is the ratzene elyon and what is the chachma in every mitzvah? Avo, what does it mean? Asiya liela. What does it mean? Asiya, however, action is liela. Pirish gufay shel atzivoy shel b'chinas adibere elyon the malchus tatzilas. The etzem tzivoy liela mishmi zu shel mekabel. What does that mean? Sharei soif ma'isa zev v'tzivoy zeh also b'ritzoyne v'chavav chachmasay ba'avchana de bina de shmiya v'chachma deriyah shebematzel kanal. What does that mean? Aval asiya liela. Is he talking about the Asiya that comes after the Shmiya? Or is he talking about, let's read this again. What? Yeah, so the Asiya in the end is, yeah. But what is it again? One more time. Oh, so when the Shmiya comes, when the Shemeya comes down and does the Asiya as a result of his Shmiya, so then that Soif Maisa is yeah, that's what I was learning it earlier. That's how I understood it. The problem is his lashon over here. Look, ki dibra elyon the malchus tatzis emshayim v'shmiya zuhu bilti asagme. Aval asiya lihela. What does that mean? Pidish gufay shalatzivoy shel b'chinas dibra elyon the malchus tatzis. If this is what he meant, then the more accurate wording would be gufay shel hamaisa, not gufay shalatzivoy. Gufay shel hamaisa that comes after the Shmiya. That would have been the clear words that he's using, but he's using other words. He's saying Gufay shel atzivoy shel b'chinas dibra elyon the malchus tatzilus, not how they're receiving it. They have to receive it without kabbalah sel malchus shemayim, doing because I tell you to do. Don't get caught up in the chachna shabai of what the kavanah is and what the inyan of it. That's why, by the way, it says that even those who are oisik in chachmas nestaris, when it comes to kavanas v'tama mitzvahs, have to put away the tama mitzvahs when they're actually doing the mitzvah. And the asiyas mitzvah is supposed to be done beikar ashikadishanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu. Nishnegay over here. You can before Pesach you can learn the kavanas and the seidas of matzah and Haipas market. When you're eating the matzah. Right now, the Eibishter commanded me to eat this matzah, and I'm eating it like a simple individual eating matzah. Now, on top of that, you can have kavanas. Fine. What he's saying over here is gufay shalat tzivoy shel b'chinas dibra elyon the malchus tatzilus le'ela mishmiya zu shalam makablim is higher than the shmiya. I guess the same idea, because the tzivoy itself of the commandment itself coming from the Eibishter, which obviously is what is he commanding? He's commanding that we should do. That actual asiya, that sivoy, that commandment is mala v'gadish with teichen, with deep meaning of what he wants. So if ma'aseh b'machshava tchil, the end, the last thing the Eibishter is doing. So it's Seif Maisa, not so much. Seif Maisa refers to a lot of times our Seif Maisa. But Seif Maisa also refers to the Eibishter Seif Maisa. What's the last thing the Eibishter Hashem has in Tzivoy HaMitzvahs? Where is his end? The Asiya we're doing. Okay, we can't do it without the Eibishter giving us koyach. Fine, I know that. But that's already, he leaves it up to our Bechira. Just listen, you won't listen. What's his end in this prayer? He has an idea. He has a concept of tefillin with all the ruchnius to get in yanim of it. It's traveling through all the various different in yanim in elokus. Where is it arriving? What's the final state while it's still in the Eibishter? The Eibishter says, put on tefillin. The dibur is his Seif Maisa. That Seif Maisa of his dibur of the tzivoy itself is higher than the shmiya of the makabel. The recipient, because the recipient is not tuning in and shouldn't be tuning in to the intention of it, but the mitzaveh, the melech in his dibur lies the entire kavanah. It's all there. He doesn't want you to analyze it, but it's there in the tzivah. That's what I think, that fits much better in the words. Higher than the makabel. That's the Seif Maisa. This tzivoy also arose in the Eibishter's Ratzon and his Chachma, ba'afchana de bina de shmiya that we spoke earlier, v'chachma de riya shebematzel, through the riya and shmiya taking place above, dahainu inyan apnimiyas hamachavim v'atoyeles sheyesh b'tzivoy shebedibre elyon. The pneumistic intention that there is in this tzivoy. Shemachmosa yedaber, which because of this he's speaking, v'yetzav, and he's commanding. Hu anikra asiya, the li'ela, this is called asiya of li'ela, shua oras haratzin v'achachma hagnuza b'dibur zeh. That's asiya, the li'ela, because the chachma and ratzin that are embedded, it's not just words. It's words with chachma and ratzin. It's words saturated with ratzin and with chachma and ratzin. Kamoisha melech ba'atzmai, he says it clearly. Just like the melech himself, yoideya lama yedaber v'yetzav v'kach v'kach. To the makabel, it's only shmiya, but and shmiya on the most simplest of levels, which means simple obedience. To the commander, to the mashpia, it has all the teichen in it. V'day l'mev. P calls that based on this Yuvin Shoyde Shamayim Razeh will understand what the Zohar is saying. B'yoski Eved the Eved Ivri. Shashama Bahar Sinai, who heard at Har Sinai. Nasa Eved Lamalcha Shamayim Deli'ela. At Har Sinai, we became a Eved to who? To Malcha Shamayim. Because we accepted. The main thing that happened at Har Sinai was not Banim. Banim, we were already from the Avos. Banim Atem, Hashem Alekechem has to do with your Neshama, Neshama Zachelik, Mamash. That we have already from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The main inyan that happened at Har Sinai is that Hashem, what did we say? What does the Eibush say to Moshe Rabbeinu? What's the sign for the Geula? But Tziyach Esam, Tavdun Esam, you're going to serve God. Serving Hashem is on Har Sinai. Kabbalah Satayra was Kabbalah Malchus Shamayim. We became Avad Ayhem. That's when we became an Am, and that's when we became Avadim to the Eibush. And L'malchus Shamayim Deli'ela b'bchina shmiya da'oizim lekabel kol tzivui bilti hasaga ba'machaven, without any hasaga. Ukeshakana adon la'atzmai, and when you acquired some other master, which you're going to relate to in the same way you should be relating to Hashem, which is what? You're going to listen to him, because that's what a servant means. You have someone who, you see, with anybody else besides a master, really, you don't necessarily have to listen. You know, a boss-employee relationship, you can stop and analyze. And you can tell your boss, I think this is not the right way to do it. Because you're still an independent entity. A master means you belong to me. You do as I say, because, there's nothing from us. I said so. That kind of an Indian should only be with Hashem. He was pogim with this shmiya. Had a pogam b'pchinas malchus shamayim d'liela. By being pogim in the shmiya, he's being pogim in malchus, because the other side of malchus, the other side of the Eibishter's mouth, is our ears. What? Yes, the other side of the telephone. There you go. Without us knowing the reason. To listen in the koil of the Eibishter. The melech is upon you, you listen. This is why you plug in b'shmiya. B'yoski yedua sha'malchus hu hashviyis. V'hi ha'nikras mitzaveh. V'amidois chagas hu ha'toira. Malchus is the ikar inyan of Malchus is mitzvahs. The ikar inyan of Torah is already, Torah is a different story. In Torah, the Eibush is allowing you to come inside already and get to know already what's going on. But that's already limit of Torah. And that's why limit of Torah in many ways is Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. But in Kiyam HaMitzvahs, it has to be what? Bittul Shmiyah, listening. In the last small little piece. Based on all of this, we're also going to understand the Seif of the mimer. The B'shas Matan Torah, at the time of Matan Torah, Akadimu Nasal and Ishma. They did Nasal and they should have been. The Seder then is for Shmiya. And then maybe you get into the Asiya Liela, which when do you get into the Asiya? After you're done Asiya, after you're done the Nishma. Your Nishma will then allow you into, it really should have been Nishma Vanasa. Because you're starting off with what? Mitzat us. Nishma, plain bittul. And then after that bittul, then you can get into the Asiya Liela, which is higher than which means you can get to the Kapnimiya Sakavana that's in the Asiya. But you're working Zashar Lashem. You got to work through Kabbalah Ser Malchus Shemayim. You got to first show up to work. You got to first show up to work before you can start understanding what the project is all about. First, you got to show up. And the showing up is bittul. So the Chur, it should have been what? Based on all of this, it should have been Nishma and then Nasa. It's a whole different Nishma over here. Pashut, we always understand. We always learned that Nishma means, we always understand. If we interpret, the way we usually interpret Nishma, Nasa is the bittul, doing, and Nishma is the understanding. But if we're teaching now that Nishma is the Pashut listening and doing the thing, and the Nasa is what's inside the actual Inyan itself, the Nasa of Hashem. So then it should have been first Nishma and then Nasa. But by Kabbalah Torah, what happened? It was Nasa and Nishma. So how does that work? So Im Kol Anal Yavor Gam Safa Mimer Azeh. The Bishmas Matan Torah K'Tima Nasa Nishma Machmas Rechimus Rechimu LeIskarov. They had such love to Hashem, they wanted to get close. Even though when we are in regular mode, not in that special, that was a honeymoon. That was an incredible moment of deep escarvus to the Eibishter. So on the regular way, mitzad yira, mitzad fear, tzarich liyas hashmiya, mekoydim bekoyl Hashem. First to be listen, simple obedience, bekoyl Hashem, shu malchus shamayim b'liyeh, which is the malchus shamayim. The achakacha asiya mamish, then you come to the asiya, which I guess means the nishma. Well, we would generally translate as nishma, but that's the asiya. Vehem amru nasa v'nishma. They said nasa v'nishma. Pidush. Ki mitzad ava shahoy lahem liskarav l'Hashem. Because of their love that they had to come close to Hashem, him shichu es b'chinas malchus shamayim shu hashmiya. What does that mean? The etzem inyan that the Eibishter. Let me put it this way. 1 second here. This fire is really getting to me. I think smoke. I can't put it out. Yeah, unless I take it out. What's the nekuda here? Is azoi. Today we should have a nishma. What has to happen before? What? His line is like this. The hemam and nasa v'nishma pidish. Ki mitzad ave shahoy lehem liskarav l'Hashem. Him shichu es b'chinas malchus shamayim shehu hashmiya. They caused malchus shamayim, which is the shmiya. Es b'chinas malchus shamayim shehu hashmiya, which is the shmiya. What does that mean? No. It's not the understanding. What he's saying is like this. In order that we should hear our bittul, which is shmiya, there has to first be a mitzvah. The Hashem has to command. And only when he commands can we have a shmiya. So he has to establish himself to speak to talk to us. That itself is hashpala gedola legamre. The fact that he should even talk to us, which means that he should take an interest in nivrayim mugbalim, ba'olam hazeh agashmi, and he should take an interest in our avodah and our inyanim is an unbelievable yerida. So, in order that we should be able to have a shmiya, which comes as a result of him playing as a king, so they were the ones who needed to stimulate nasa, the ratzon and the chachma. In other words, what they did was they reached into the inner world of the Eibishter. They reached into the inner world of his inner intentions, which he spoke before is the Riyah and the Shmiyah. which is what excites his emotions, which eventually causes him to speak. And that's the idea of the Nasa, the Nishma. They went up into the Nasa before the Nishma. They made that their Nasa should create the Nishma. He explains it. Biyois, listen to these words. Ki midas malchus li is dibra elyon mitzaveh. The midas of malchus, that the dibra elyon should start talking. He yerida gedoyla ma'atzmes amatzel. That's the biggest yerida. Ki em tzedakta matitem loy. Because if you read, in other words, the etzim and yanim don't have any chashivas mitzad atzma, other than the fact that he decides to take interest in them. Mitzad atzma, they have no chashivas at all because they're all nothing. Ki yedua. V'omnam mipnei goydel chaftzam. Because of their great desire to be miskasher to the Eibishter, him shichu aleim oil malchus shemayim. They drew upon them Hashemayim. Pidish sheyimshach dibure elyon v'yitzave aleim. In other words, once there is tzivuyim already, so then the seder is what? First nishma, and then nasa. But if the king is not wanting to be a king, meaning he's reclused within himself. He's in his merumim big estate, completely removed. So what are you going to have a nishma? There's no tzivui. So you have to first be mamshich. There should be the whole inyan of his malchus. Today that should happen. There was a nasa first, and what does that mean? V'nimtza shehem asu es devar Hashem hu malchus. The nasa v'nishma means that they created the level of nishma. Not Nasa. Nasa's not referring to them. They were ma'oider the Hashem to create the Dvar Hashem, which we will then respond to with the Nishma. In other words, they created the Nishma. V'nimtza Hashem asu as Dvar Hashem hu malchus k'moshe kasa b'zoyar balak al pasuk shchoirani on the pasuk oisei devarei. Oisei devarei means we make him have dibur. We cause him to speak. Which means we build the entire inyan of Sfiras HaMalchus. That's what we do in Rosh Hashanah, we're Binyan HaMalchus. We excite him to want to be our Melech, and then he'll be Mitzvah us. V'zeh nasa v'achar kach nishma. Pirish ki ava goyrem es ha-shefa mal maylo lamata. The ava is goyrem, this shefa, to come down mal maylo lamata, sha'asiyah kadma l'shmiya. Which in this case, the asiyah will come before the Shmiya canal. The Asiya li'ela, because the Asiya is above a Dailamev. V'zen nasa l'dvar Hashem hu malchus. So there is nasa, we will make the nishma. Nasa v'nishma, we will make that there should be the nishma. Which means they are drawing down Hashem into a state where he will command, and as a result of that, we will create the nishma element of the Makabla. Nishma, and afterwards we will hear. Once we will create the Nishma, we will create the Dvar Hashem. Nasa l'Dvar Hashem. What's going to happen next? Nishma, and then we're going to hear l'Kabel Malchus Shemayim b'Bchina Shmiya, or maybe more. Maybe it's a little off. I think I was a little off. Nasa means we will create him to come down to his Asiya. We create him to come down to, what did he say? What's Nasiya Li'ela? Nasiya Li'ela is his dibur. Then you're going to listen to it. Yeah, that's right. Yes, but that requires Ava. And that avoid of Ava caused him to take an interest, to make a long distance call, to call. But now we understand why, going back to the Eved, that the Pegam of the Eved is Dafke the Oizen. Even though usually Oizen is referring to the very sensitive elements of above, but that's as it is in the Pneumius of the Lakus. As it translates into our relationship with him from Malchus to us, Nishma is a whole different meaning. Yes, that's it. Yes. So this is the beard and the Zohar. No, because the Zohar himself in the end concludes with that. The Zohar, I'll read, look in the Zohar. The Zohar, after the Zohar explains that the Shmi is a pagam in the thing, the Zohar then goes and the Zohar asks, you see it over here, the Zohar like puts in parenthetically, look over here. parenthetical over here. Since he was mechavan there, it stays in him. But the this is what he's teaching. Will begin the Yisrael kat kriva latira de Sinai. Oh, ve'eva berichimu de libayo leskarva lekutcha berichu. Akadimu asiya lishmiya. Because he's mefarish this in you. What does the Zohar want over here? In other words, yeah, the shmiya bekad mesa. Because regularly, that's what he's saying. Regularly, the say that is that what the shmiya bekad mesa ulabasar asiya. But because have a berichimu de libayo leskarva lekutcha berichu, akadima asiya lishmiya, which is fakert than what a regular needs to be. Because usually it needs to be the hashmiya bekadmais alabasar asi. Shmiya bahai shmita talia. Shmiya is dependent on shmita, which is malchus. Valda, now it goes back. Valda, who pagam lahai shmiya, is pagam shmiya delay. So this is like a parenthetical something with the Zohar saying, oibs is a Zohar that what? That asi is higher and shmi is lower. And our avodah has to be mumatal l'maylo, starting with shmiya. The whole Har Sinai doesn't work out. The whole Nasav and Ishma. So the Zohar is explaining because in that case they created the shmiya, and that was through the v'aveberechimu de lebayo leskarva lekutcha berichu akadima asiya lishma. The hashmiya bekadmeis or lebasar asiya is basically that usually it needs to be different.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Look at this. You sat through the ganze myself.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's 10 to 2.
Oh wow.
We said we're going to what? It's 2. Yes. All right. Yeah. Learn some primus atayra tonight. Wonderful. So you learn here in
You made a thing for the Kedoshim.
We did 45.
I don't know. Yeah.
We did 45. We did 45. Yeah.
Okay.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful. There was a lot of singing. It was the first of dancing. Yeah. It's a pella awesome. Yeah.
Very good.
Very good. Take care. What's your name again?
Which wolf are you? Tzvi Shapiro. Original label is received. Which Shapiro? Which Shapiro? But Reuben Wolf. I mean, what's
Reuben Wolf? Actually, I'm Reuben Wolf too.
I don't know what to say. Are you related? It's cheap. It's cheap. Oh, yes. Shimshon Silver.
Oh, that's right. Shimshon Silver.
My father's already on this. You think about it.
Oh, his father's right. It's funny because it's old when I was actually going into the I went to take a better.
It is before I have a crush.
No, Crash is my cousin.
Oh, really?
Crash is my father's first cousin.
Yes.
That's the
But he wasn't received at the first son by just the rebel. He was the first class.
He was ready in the house.
Yeah. And he didn't take you?
Yeah, but he was first cousin. And he still couldn't get me in, but he thought I was too young. Then I went to Bluja. Bluja opened up the same year, then it became East Mayor. Yaakov
How did you get the Chabad after it?
When I was 17, 18, I was like, so I was literally still about him. I like to talk about stuff to check it out. And I was doing picture management.
Yeah, it's up the bench.
Very good. Take it on the bench.